Hello everybody and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Video Clips. And this is the only video clips this week because Thursday is Thanksgiving. I'll come back to that again at the end. Okay, the new meta-analysis showing that low-fat diets are not more effective for weight loss is an example of how poorly constructed studies with inconsequential results combined with misinterpretation and misreporting can contribute to public confusion about nutrition. And every time something like this comes out, this came out a couple weeks ago, I get a bunch of emails saying, how do you explain this, from panicked people who think they've been telling people the wrong thing, and etc. So I'm going to talk about this whole situation, this analysis and what it said, and it just is it's the best example of how screwed up this whole thing can get. So this particular analysis included 53 randomized controlled studies of weight loss programs, non-weight loss programs, and weight maintenance trials. It was a big cohort, over 68,000 adults. The fact that the selection criteria were 53 studies out of over 3,500 means that this is not representative of the preponderance of the evidence. Now, as is common in studies looking at diet, low fat was not clearly defined, and levels of dietary fat in the various studies ranged from less than 10% of calories to 30% or more. A diet with 30% of calories from fat may be lower in fat than the diets of some people, but those of us advocating a low-fat diet have continually reminded people that a 30% fat diet does not change anybody's health or weight significantly. Most of us are talking about fat intake of 15% or less per day. Now, the higher fat diets were also variable and included participants maintaining their usual diet. Well, I'm not sure how maintaining the usual diet would help with weight loss, but let's put that aside for a minute. There were low carbohydrate diets and high fat diets. Now, how the participants learned about how they were supposed to follow dietary plans was variable and ranged from just handing out instructions in pamphlets to actually counseling sessions with dietitians and group meetings. Calorie restriction was a component of some of the plans, but not all of them, and while the duration varied, most of the interventions lasted for a year. Now, the results of all of the programs were terrible. The average participant lost 5.96 pounds. That's less than half a pound a month. In other words, none of the interventions was effective, and what this meta-analysis did was it compared a lot of ineffective weight loss plans to tell you which of the bad ones was the best one for you to eat. It's amazing that this whole thing happens the way that it does. The headlines led people to believe that the analysis showed that low-fat diets were not better, but here is what actually the authors wrote. We noted no difference between low-fat and higher-fat dietary interventions when all weight loss trials were combined. Now, that hardly sounds like a resounding endorsement for high-fat eating. I mean, they're really very inconsequential results. The researchers were able to find small differences between some studies which showed that higher fat diets resulted in longer-term weight loss of just 2.53 pounds than lower fat diets. I mean, 2.53 pounds advantage? Not much. Perhaps, and that brings me to my next point, which is that the most important issue about all of this is that none of these diets changed the lives of the participants in meaningful ways. And this plagues medicine in general. Medical journals are filled with studies that have managed to identify something statistically significant that has no meaning for individuals in their daily lives. So just think about it. An obese person who needs to lose 100 pounds, the loss of less than 6 pounds in a year, or a program that allows that person to keep off an extra 2.53 pounds, that's virtually meaningless. I mean, the meager weight loss doesn't change the person's size, perception of self, disease status, self-esteem, pressure, pain in the joints, or any other important marker for health or quality of life. And this goes to another problem, which is that when people spend a lot of energy to get such poor results, it really serves to demotivate them. I mean, why would somebody based on that say, I'll tell you what, this was so fabulous, next year I'm going to work harder at it, because if I keep doing that and the results keep being the same, I'm on track to be normal weight in another 3 decades. I mean, it's just absolutely ludicrous. The researchers did find that, quote, low-fat diets led to greater weight loss only when compared with subjects' usual diet, and to this I just laughed out loud when I read it. What a great investment of research dollars. We now know that weight loss only results when people do something different than they were doing before. Wow, makes me happy to be a taxpayer that we fund this kind of stuff. In an accompanying editorial in the same journal, Dr. Kevin Hall inserts some reason into the discussion. He says that weight loss in all of these studies was unimpressive, and that the question we should be asking is, why is weight loss so poor regardless of the diet prescribed? I agree, but instead of addressing this, the focus seems to be on telling Americans that a low-fat diet doesn't work for weight loss. In fact, the lead researcher, her name is Deirdre Tobias, told Medscape Medical News, "For decades now, we've been told that to lose weight or to keep from gaining weight, we need to not eat fat, yet look where we are today. We're all overweight or obese." Well, she makes a major assumption here that isn't true, and that is that people actually have consumed less fat, but they have not. In fact, the food category representing the biggest increase in intake between 1970 and 2003 was for fats and oils, a 63% increase. The low-fat diet has not failed to help Americans lose weight. Americans have failed to convert to a low-fat diet. Tobias goes on to say, "So our hunch was that to simply reduce fat if we want not to be fat was not going to be an effective strategy for long-term weight loss." She's right about this. I mean, if you just reduce fat and you don't pay attention to the dietary pattern, you probably aren't going to solve the problem. Unfortunately, most people like to hear good news about their bad habits, and the Paleo, Weston Price, Grain Brain contingent will use this poorly constructed study to promote their eating plans to the public. This type of research, and I use that term loosely, often justified as a means to sort out our confusion about diet and health, usually just adds to the confusion about these issues, and the poor person who's sitting at home trying to sort this out and figure out the right thing to do gets more confused the more they read. So what a king-size waste of the funding for something like this. Why don't we study something that makes a difference? I'm so tired of reading ridiculous research that doesn't change anybody's life in any meaningful way. All right, that's all for today, and actually for the week, as I mentioned earlier, just one broadcast this week because Thursday is Thanksgiving if you live in the United States, and so I want to remind you that this is a day when it is easy to veer from your dietary pattern. So when you're getting ready to take that fourth piece of sweet potato pie, ask yourself, what would Dr. Pam say if she was sitting here at the table with me? When you're getting ready to eat 2.5 pounds of turkey, ask yourself, what would Dr. Pam say? So just so you know, I am going to have a piece of sweet potato pie. We make the best sweet potato pie at Wellness Farm Health, and I'm looking forward to it as I'm talking to you here, and I can taste it. And I probably will have a glass of wine with my family, but I'll be mostly eating according to plan, and you should too. Have a wonderful, blessed Thanksgiving with your family and friends, and I'll be back to you next week with more news.